This is the walkthrough video for PCTC 2022, round 2, question 5, rock, paper, scissors, and wand. So this is like the normal game of rock, paper, and scissors, but there's also this extra caveat, which is that wand exists, and therefore we have to deal with this whole rule set about wand. But the way we'll solve this problem is we'll just assume it's rock, paper, scissors for now, and then once we finish the rock, paper, scissors part of the game, we'll then add in all of the stuff to do with the wand. And that should be a bit easier to deal with that way. So the first thing to do is take our inputs. We know there are always going to be 6 inputs because it says right there. So we can just have a for loop that runs 6 times as we take our inputs in. But before we do any of that, we need to set our scores for our players to 0. So let's say the score of player 1 is going to be 0 and 2 is also going to be 0. So at the beginning of our code, we're setting them both to 0 outside this loop. And then inside this loop, we're going to take in our first input. So let's say, what should we call this variable? Let's call it choices. So choices is going to be our input. And as I said earlier, we're going to assume wand just doesn't exist for now. And we're going to try and solve this problem as if it's a normal rock, paper, scissors problem. So to do that, we need to first check to make sure wand is not in choices. So if wand doesn't exist, for example, in this line or this line, wand doesn't exist, and therefore we can treat this as normal rock, paper, scissors. Then we'll basically just go through every combination and check who's going to win. So if choices 0 is equal to rock, then if choices 1 is equal to paper, then they win. So we can increase to score by 1. I'm going to write the code like this. It may look a bit messier, but once we have all of the code written, it should end up looking nicer. You'll see what I mean. Right, so L, if the second player actually chose rock, then nothing happens. So actually, let's just skip that. But if they chose scissors, then player 1 won. So we can increase their score by 1. And so we just do nothing if it's a draw, because it says somewhere here, if it's a draw, then neither of them get a score. Okay, now we can just repeat this twice more for all of the other combinations. Let's say if they do paper, then if player 2 does scissors, they're going to win, and if player 2 does rock, player 1's going to win. And our final combination is going to be if player 1 does rock, and therefore if player 2, scissors, therefore if player 2 does rock, they win, but if player 2 does paper, they lose. Okay, so we programmed the basic game of rock, paper, scissors here. And now we need to account for this if statement that we added up here. So now we need to account for if there is a wand in one of our choices, then how do we deal with that? So if it's a draw, then there are different sets, then there's this whole complicated set of rules. But if it's not a draw, then it's pretty easy. So let's deal with the easy case first. We always love doing the easy things first. So if I would say if choices does not equal WW, so if they're both not the same, if it's not a draw, then one of them is going to have won. So if the first one is W, then player 1 is going to be the winner, so we can increase one score by 1. Else then player 2 would have been the winner, so we can increase their score by 1. Okay, and now the hardest cases of all is this one, which is if both of them put wand, then we have to deal with this set of rules up here. So what this says, it says, then that round is drawn, so no one gets any points, okay? But if the wand has been used to win a round previously, then the score of whoever won with wand most recently is reset to 0. So we need to keep track of who's won with wand. So let's create another variable. Let's say 1 with wand. Let's call it 3 W's, 1 with wand. And let's set that to 0 initially. And let's say if, for example, in this case where player 1 won with wand, let's say 1 with wand variable is now going to be 1 because player 1 won. And if player 2 won with the wand, then let's set the 1 with wand variable to equal 2. Let's just make that look a bit nicer. Okay, and that means if it's a draw down here, then we can simply check who lost 1, and therefore who lost 1 has their new score is going to be set to 0. So if www equals 1, then 1 is going to be set to 0, else if it equals 2, L if it equals 2, then 2 is set to 0, like that. And of course, www might still just be the 0 that we initially set at the start, because no one's 1 yet, so we just set it to 0 as like a blank variable. And the final step to do is, so the game's done, the final step to do is now just to print out the output. So that's going to be, let's use an F string, so that's going to be 1-2. And hopefully that works. So I guess the key part for this one is firstly to decompose a problem into multiple parts. So initially we only focused on rock, paper, scissors and ignored wand. And then when it got to wand, what we did is we had to create a new variable that kept track of whoever lost one. And based on what the value of this variable was, we then changed stuff and changed scores and reset the variable and whatever. And that gets us full marks.